Chapter 15. Return to Roseto Capo Spulico. The only thing I say to God is, Lord, forgive the sins of all human beings, and make them love you as they are obliged to love you. Umile di Bisignano. The moment the castle was in sight, a sense of foreboding invaded Antonio's mind. Constanzo was still at his side, and so was Damianos. What questions would I have to pose for which Lucantonio would have the answer? Antonio asked as they were approaching Roseto Capo Spulico. This relates to what happened in the years you spent in Umbriatico, your eminence, Damianos replied. Perhaps casting your mind to the events that took place while in exile and in Umbriatico, you could formulate the questions that will need answers. That is fairly an enigmatic statement, Damianos. The only memory I have of Umbriatico is my refusal to comply with Richelieu's imperious demands. But there is something else that happened a while after you resigned from your post in Belcastro. Ah, yes, of course. How could I have forgotten the poor servant of God? Yes, I remember his brief visit to our house, Constanzo rejoined. You are talking about Umile di Bisignano, don't you? Precisely. He has now passed, unfortunately, Damianos said. But Lucantonio will refer to him in our conversations, I'm sure. May God rest his soul, Antonio concluded pensively as they arrived in front of the castle. As majestic as ever, the structure was standing proud against the blue sky surrounding its tower. Soon after the carriage stopped in the courtyard, the stable boys, housemen, and valets ran to meet the visitors. Lucantonio was nowhere in sight. Antonio knew he would be waiting indoors, but within minutes the tall man stood in the doorway to meet the guests. Welcome to our residence, Your Eminence. I am very happy that the missive reached you in time before you left Rome. It is most important that we meet. With a handsome and statuous allure, the Baron di Bisignano extended an arm toward the foyer. But for now, let's go indoors, make yourself comfortable after a long voyage, and ensure that all your needs are at your disposal. Thank you, Baron Bisignano. We are very grateful for your hospitality indeed, Antonio replied, walking with the Baron toward the grand staircase that would lead to their respective rooms. We shall wait for you in my private chambers. Your valet will show you the way when you are ready, and please do not hesitate to ask for what you may need. Antonio nodded his thanks and followed the houseman up the stairs, Constanzo and Damianos in tow. Once Antonio had given instruction to the valet as to what he required for the night, he went out of his room and down the corridor where he was sure to find Constanzo and Damianos' rooms. The two men were waiting in Constanzo's chambers. Very nice residence, isn't it? Constanzo noted, looking around him once again. Yes, said Antonio as he took a seat in one of the chairs furnishing the small apartment. It's not as cold as I imagined the place to be when looking at it from the outside. And you will enjoy the warmth of a fire burning in the hearth throughout dinner, I'm sure. You were very quiet throughout the last part of our journey, Damianos, Antonio noted. Is there anything we should know? You will know soon enough, Antonio. The name of Umile will come in our conversations, but the implication of his actions is what brought us here. Could you perhaps be a little less inscrutable? Damianos burst out laughing. I seem to remember a man who wanted to run before he could walk, and that man resembles you in every way. Do I know the man? No, Antonio, you do not know the man at the moment, but you will know him in the future. Very well then, Damianos. I shall be patient, since it seems to be the prescribed attitude to adopt this evening. Patience is a virtue, Antonio, Constanzo said almost in a whisper as he rose from his seat to follow his cousin out of his chambers. When they arrived in the Baron's personal rooms and the valet announced them, Lucantonio stood up and came to the door to meet the three men. Please, and do sit down, Your Eminence, and brother Constanzo, and you too, Damianos. It is always a treat to see one of the Lord's shepherds in one's house. Welcome. They sat down. Would you share a goblet of wine with me while we talk? Definitely, Antonio replied, a broad smile across his lips. Our throats are parched from the dusty road and aridity of Calabria. Once the wine was poured in pewter goblets and the men were relaxing now, Lucantonio said, I am sure you wonder why your parents has dispatched you to my residence in such short notice, do you not? Antonio nodded. I could not recall readily where or when I had occasion to meet a member of your family, but Damianos here reminded me of the event, and I must present my condolences, Baron. Thank you, Your Eminence. Umile is now in a much better place, and we can indeed teach as many souls as he has the opportunity to encounter. We mourned his departure, of course, but I, for one, was glad that he finally earned the rest he so deserved." "Are you grateful for his death?" Damianos asked. "Yes, Damianos, I am, and please don't mistake my relief as an admission of guilt. Far from it. I was so troubled when, as a young man, Umile was subjected to the torture of an inquisition." "An inquisition?" Constanzo said, obviously surprised. "Absolutely. You were not present at the time, brother Constanzo. You were much too young to attend such an ordeal, but your cousin here will tell you what happened, if you please, your eminence." "For what I recall, yes, the event occurred soon after I fled Belcastro, following my disobedience regarding the imposition of the Red Cardinal's demands onto my flock. I could not abide by the implication of such demands, and Umile, in his reverence, could not deny the Cardinal anything. However, Umile was also blessed with extraordinary gifts of prophecy, miracles, and especially a strange infused knowledge. Although he was illiterate and without education, he responded to questions on scriptures, and on any point whatsoever of our church's doctrine, with a precision that astounded theologians. On this particular occasion, he was called to be examined by an assembly of secular and religious prelates. They had doubts about Umile's abilities to be a representation of God on earth. One person distinguished himself during the examination. His name was the Inquisitor, Monsignor Campanelli of Naples. He wanted to exact revenge on your family, didn't he, Lucantonio?" "Yes, your eminence, the reason being that my family unfortunately had resisted the Vatican's ruling regarding the worship on the Sabbath." "My great-uncle Caspar Ricciulli was at the origin of the rift that grew between your family and the Vatican in this regard." "Yes, your eminence. My parents and uncles could not see the reason for changing the day of sacrament from Saturday to Sunday, and as, for many years, we still abided by the Greek Orthodox precepts, unfortunately the conflicts stemming from spiritual beliefs or matters of faith cannot be resolved by the sword. Only the Lord can settle such differences. Therefore, Monsignor Campanelli thought appropriate in his position of Inquisitor to question my cousin and to impose a sanction of heretic upon his person if all of the men among those questioning the young men were in agreement." "But no one could be in agreement, as I recall," Antonio noted. "Exactly, your eminence. My cousin responded to all of their questions with such exactitude, quoting scripture, chapter and verse, which he could not have read since he didn't know how to read. His answers were all endowed of such great wisdom that he surprised his examiners." "One of the answers he gave was memorable," Antonio said. "What his prayers to God were compromised of, Umile answered, 'The only thing I say to God is, Lord, forgive the sins of all human beings, and make them love you as they are obliged to love you.'" Lucantonio smiled at the recollection. "Very true. He indeed left a mark in most of the lives he touched, and he further made several remarks that were shrugged out of turn at the time, but which will become relevant to you, your eminence, shortly." Antonio raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? I do not recall anything of the sort." "No, your eminence, you would not, because he made those remarks in confidence and away from the prying ears or eyes of the examiners." "I see. And now you feel it is time to reveal these remarks? And why would that be, Baron Bisignano?" "The reason is quite simple, yet elaborate in its predictive sense." Antonio turned to Damianos, took a sip of wine and grinned. "Our Baron must be a relation of yours, my friend. He seems to have a predilection for the enigmatic. So pray tell, what knowledge did Umile impart at the time?" "I apologize, your eminence, for the manner in which I introduced the subject, but these two remarks, or nota bene, remained inscrutable to me as well for the longest time." Lucantonio sipped a bit of wine too. "As you may recall, the Emperor Suleiman II and his Grand Vizier pre-offered a threat at the issue of the Battle of Lepanto some 70 years ago." Yes, I recall the words," Antonio said. "In wresting Cyprus from you, we deprived you of an arm. In defeating our fleet, you have only shaved our beard. An arm, when cut off, cannot grow again, but a shorn beard will grow all the better for the razor. Is that correct?" "Very good, your eminence. Yes, those are exactly the words that were spat out of the Grand Vizier's mouth. And these words came back to mind when I heard Umile's prophecy. He said, 'Tarry ye at Jericho until your beards be grown.' But isn't that relevant to the sword of the Good Samaritan?" "Yes, however, if you take Luke's 30th verse and the 10th chapter of his Gospel, you will notice a similarity. A certain man came down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment and wounded him and departed, leaving him half dead." "I am sorry, Baron, but I don't see—" "You are that certain man, your eminence. The thieves have tried to rob you of your honesty, and you stood your grounds in exile. Umile knew of your plight. He wanted you to remain in Jericho. Umbriatico, in his instance, until your shorn beard grew again. Of course, he wanted me to encounter a good Samaritan, perhaps. Lucantonio shook his head. Not exactly, your eminence. He only mentioned this in order for you to have patience. But now your time has come. My time has come to do what? Has Umile enlightened you further as to what he saw me do at this time? Yes, in a way he has. Yes, I'm not cleric, nor do I wish to append understanding to Umile's inspired prophecy. The words, as you will appreciate, are a little strange. The Baron left his seat to go to a small scretiware in a corner of the room. He opened it and retrieved a parchment. When he came back to his seat, he added, "Here is what I wrote for him as he dictated the words to me." Baffled, Antonio took the parchment and read, "Family of Rogliano, your memory from 1548 with Gaspar, Bishop of Scala, and the Archbishop of Reggio. Jeremy was Bishop of Belcastro in 1573. Antonio, jurisconsult, was Archbishop of Constanzo in 1582, recognized noble by ministerial decree in centuries to come. The Marquis Vittorio Spreti will mention the Richelieu bishops of the Lord in the historic and noble Italian encyclopedia, described in Milan in centuries to come." "But what does it all mean?" Antonio asked, switching his gaze from Lucantonio to Damianos. He obviously didn't understand. Damianos extended a hand and asked, "May I see the parchment?" Of course, Damianos. Thank you." Antonio replied, handing the note to him. "If you can enlighten all of us, particularly me, we would appreciate it." As soon as he read the few lines, Damianos said, "I think it will be time for us to leave soon, your eminence. Your journey will probably take us farther than any of us have expected." "What does that mean?" Lucantonio asked, visibly taken aback. "Please do not tell us that we have to travel farther tonight," Constanzo put in, obviously worried. "No, Constanzo, but we should leave at first light." "Damianos, I know you are endowed of immense knowledge and have infused knowledge such as Umile had. Could you then indulge me with an explanation?" The Baron was pleading now. "Perhaps it is fitting for you to know that your guests are not only members of a family that have counted among their people kings and queens of great recall, but they are also to be bestowed nobility, as Umile mentioned, in a little more than 250 years hence." "Amazing," Constanzo exclaimed. "I always believed nobility resided in one's heart." "Not only in your heart, Constanzo, but through your deeds you shall be recognized as a nobleman, and both your great-uncle and cousins will be endowed with the recognition they richly deserve when men will have followed the advice of God."